Alright, so this is part 2 of the book review video. I got some, well, first of all, see me on BitChute, don't forget, if you're watching this on YouTube. Hopefully BitChute is not as Jude as YouTube is. BitChute.com/obsidian_pill. If you don't know how to spell that, you're a fucking retard and you don't deserve to see the channel. So I got some stuff I forgot to put in the first video, and I was talking about some problems with Microsoft Azure and all that shit. But anyways, so Michelle Langley, one thing I want to note is that she is an optimist. She seems more optimistic. I mean, generally when people write books like this, there's supposed to be like a call to action that, you got to give people a silver lining, got to give them some hope or whatever. So she seems like more of an optimist. She thinks that, if only we do this, or if we do that, if men do this, if women do this, our relationships will be better, And okay, maybe there's some hope there, but I'm just not nearly as hopeful as she seems to be. I got to point that out. So as for what I forgot from the previous video, there is something here. Let me fucking scroll. Okay, so when I said to suspend making a choice is a choice in and of itself. Michelle points out that women do this only until they feel apathetic, and then they can, they feel like they can actually make a choice to dump their boyfriend or husband or whatever, which is extremely cruel, and it highlights the lack of regard for men's feelings. And I want to get into this a little bit more if I'm not, if I'm not super clear here. But this is part of the big issue for women. Love is a feeling. For men, it's a duty, it's obligation. And I talked about this before. Feelings come and go. A man will stick to his woman regardless of his feelings, and women won't do that. This is what makes men the truly committed sex, despite the myths that are constantly perpetuated about female virtue. It's like men get led on a lot by women, and women to the point where, they've already mentally checked out of the relationship, but they kind of try to fool the man into thinking that they haven't. But their actions, that's why they always say you gotta watch their actions, not their words. I'm just beyond sick of this notion that women are the more committed sex and that they want committed relationships. It's classic projection. They want one-way commitment. They want the man to commit while they don't. I honestly think that women don't even know what commitment means. They're the ones who monkey branch. They're the ones who are hypergamous. They initiate 70% of divorces, if not more. So they're fueling that Jewish industry. Every female I've ever been with has had one foot halfway, they've had one foot out the door in the relationship. And her feelings about you drastically change by the hour. You're constantly criticized for even the slightest things, Again, men are committed to committed sex because we are committed regardless of how we feel at any given moment, and I've had those moments where I feel like, man, fuck this bitch. But it's like I made a commitment, And so that part where she talks about love is not about getting the right person, it's about treating a person right. That kind of reminds me of certain cultures. They have this culture where you don't marry the person you love the person you marry. And I'm more in favor of that, if anything, because it takes the irresponsible, irrational, individualistic sort of love out of the equation. Communal matchmaking is the way to go, if anything, long story short, the consumerist embodiment of love just shows us the fantasy, not the reality, And that's how we think it should be in real life. Like, we think it should be like the movies or whatever, you got these women waiting for their meet cute, quote unquote. If you don't know what that term means, look it up. Meet cute. I can't get too much into this stuff because it'll, whatever. It'll make the video too long. And one more thing that I want to talk about. She talks about, there's this huge passage. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I left it out of the previous video, but she kind of talks about the Titanic here and how like rich men, had a higher mortality rate than poor women. And that's just the power of like the shaming tactics that women use to get men to take up for them, essentially. The shame that those men would have faced would have been more harsh than dying. It would have been more harsh than flat out dying. And that's why the rich men had a higher mortality rate, likely protecting even the lowest of the low women. Being a woman essentially makes you higher, is a greater status than being an aristocrat. I mean, need I say more? And another little tidbit I left out of the previous video is that story about Michelle Langley's mom and her brother and her mom's being a bitch and whatever. Oftentimes, and they mentioned this in the book, oftentimes women behave like that because they're emulating their mothers. They're emulating the bitchy, naggy, demanding sort of behavior of their mothers, like this tyrannical ball and chain, as they call it. They're emulating their mothers when they behave like that. So, on to the main portion of this video. Unfortunately, many couples only interact through their roles as husband and wife. That's why women often say they feel lonelier in their marriages than they would if they were living alone. Many women are simply becoming conscious of the fact that they've been playing a role, which is why they often feel as though they're going through the motions in their marriages. Women need to stop waiting for men to see them for who they are and start being who they really are. When you were trying to get Brad to marry you, remember that's how you set things up from the beginning when you're trying to get Brad to marry you. Remember what Armstrong said in her article? Marriage has the ability to erode every fiber of your identity. It can turn you into a yes woman. It can lure you into a pattern of pleasing and will turn you into someone you hardly recognize. This is what women need to understand. The problem isn't with men. The problem lies with women themselves. Women only become yes women because they believe men don't really want to be with them. So the problem can't be solved until women understand that they are creating their own problems and that their pleasing behavior is just an outgrowth of their low self-esteem. The fact that women see men as powerful and privileged in spite of their obvious weaknesses can be explained by evolution. Seeing men as powerful frees women to push their own demands, thereby benefiting themselves and their children. Nature selects for the woman who feels a man could and should be doing more for her, if only he would. Conversely, nature selects against the woman who is aware that her anger stresses her man and wears him out. Better that she not know that her anger stresses him, so she can push him without her conscience bothering her. Men go along with the ruse because revealing weaknesses disqualifies them as providers and limits their progeny. So men and women accept the pretense because each benefits genetically from seeing men as stronger and women as subordinate. But yeah, going back to one of these passages, you hear this all the time. Women complaining about how they lost themselves in their relationships. They were playing a role in order to secure something from the man. Michelle Langley talks about a woman who says what she'd do differently if she got married again. She says, quote, "I'd guard against the things that make me me," essentially. Paraphrasing. But notice her regrets have everything to do with what she needed to do rather than what her husband had to do. Okay, so this whole thing about seeing women as subordinate and men as weak, this is actually a feature of psychopathy, if I recall correctly. Sort of goading other people into thinking that they're more capable than you, speaking it into existence, so that those people are naturally obligated to do more and to carry more of the load. Women epitomize psychopathy. I mean, seriously, just read an article about psychopathy or narcissism. replace every instance of those words with the word woman or women or females or whatever, and it actually becomes more accurate. So, I mean, the ancients and the Greeks and all that, they knew exactly what they were talking about, and their, constant derision and criticizing of women. Sandra, you may have lost interest in sex for a while, but that certainly isn't the case anymore. You still tell your husband that you have no interest in sex, while truthfully you not only want sex, but are having sex all the time. So how can you make that statement with a straight face? We constantly see this. Just go to the Dead Bedrooms subreddit, and we constantly see this fake lack of sexual desire from women. But not only do they want sex, but they're having a bunch of sex with men aside from their husbands or boyfriends or whatever. They might even be doing it with other women. And this woman, Sandra, by the way, is the cheater. In the previous video, I was talking about these people, Sandra, the other guy's name, one of the guys, the guy she's cheating with is named Kurt, and her husband's name is Brad. And women pretend like they don't want sex because they need to maintain their image. Imagine if the women who have dead bedrooms, went around telling their husbands that they wanted to get gangbanged. Her fake image of innocence would immediately crumble. It's not that she doesn't want sex, and men are catching on to this lie, thankfully. Men are often just props women use to fulfill their fantasies. Prior to getting married and having children, you had a specific goal that you wanted to achieve, and your thoughts and behaviors aligned with these goals. However, once you achieved your goals, you became restless because the only remaining goals were to stay married and provide for your offspring. Today, providing for your offspring requires little effort because the majority of us in this country are no longer struggling to survive. As soon as you rise above mere survival, the question of meaning and purpose becomes of paramount importance in your life. Many people feel caught up in the routines of daily living that seem to deprive their life of significance. Some believe life is passing them by or has passed them by already. Others feel severely restricted by the demands of their job and supporting a family or by their financial situation. Some are consumed by acute stress, others by acute boredom. Some are lost in frantic doings, others in stagnation. Many people long for freedom and the expansion that prosperity promises. Others already enjoy the relative freedom that comes with prosperity and discover that even that is not enough to endow their lives with meaning. There is no substitute for true purpose. I try to tell people this all the time who seem to have bought into the consumer capitalist delusion that money will bring happiness. Money brings security, not happiness. Security is not happiness, but women seem to buy into this because of Jezebel materialism or whatever. This is why I also get so mad when people mistake quantity of life for quality of life. These studies talk about bullshit and how about married men are happier, but they rely on lifespan metrics. But it's like domestic cats live longer too. You can read Wilkes McDermott's suicide note for more on that kind of, calling out that kind of bullshit mentality. The most miserable people I've ever known have been affluent, and I'm sure I've seen data which correlates with that as well. Every 2 seconds, some celebrity offs himself or has a drug overdose or whatever. The very people who sell these lies to us are dying like this. What does that tell you? Now, on to buyer's remorse and the hamster wheel that the modern man has been sold. The majority of us have no idea that we've been chasing an illusion until after we've attained what we were taught and grew to believe would bring us happiness. This is why most of us experience a very painful awakening during which we begin to reach out for any type of pleasure we can find. This is an attempt to ease the pain of feeling that we were duped into a life that we may not actually want to live. So you see, in order for people to live on autopilot, they must be transfixed or focused on that which can never be attained. In our culture, we are focused on the perpetuated belief that happiness can be achieved in the future by acquiring money and things, as well as finding the right mate and having children. Economists thrive. I think economist basically means Jew, to be real. Economists thrive when individuals strive because individuals will only strive for their own happiness, it is essential that they mistakenly believe that producing and consuming are routes to personal well-being. We must believe that children and money bring happiness regardless of whether such beliefs are true. While we believe we are raising children and earning paychecks to increase our share of happiness, we're actually doing these things for reasons beyond our ken. Oh, beyond our ken. Echo. Parentheses, parentheses, parentheses. We are nodes in a social network, which is why we continue to toil, continue to mate, and continue to be surprised when we do not experience all the joy we so gullibly anticipated. Oh, that's a fucking red pill right there. What the... The majority of your beliefs are really someone else's beliefs. You were conditioned and trained to think and behave in a particular manner. His desire to work things out was a direct result of his emotional dependency on her. This is one thing that goes unspoken so much because we're not supposed to talk about the grievances of men, and men are supposed to be strong and silent, but men are incredibly emotionally reliant on women more than they are on us. Because the world only validates us insofar as we can embody what women want. That's why the best thing a man can do for himself generally tends to be accumulation of wealth. You know, you even see that with the MGTOWs, just, you know, get money, get not bitches, but, you know, saying that you're buying into the female materialistic mentality. You know, the best booger eater in the world, you know, if you got $1 million to be the best booger eater in the world, that would make you valuable, you know, as a man. I remember when I was a hardcore gamer and I was ridiculed for it, more or less, you know, but imagine if I was one of these pro gamers who's, you know, making like millions of dollars these days. No one would ridicule that. Anyways, it's not unheard of for men to be in tatters and crying for her to stay when the female is going to break up with him or whatever. I've seen it, you know, and as red-pilled as I am, it's an extremely difficult urge to resist as a man, and I would say I've resisted it better than most, but I have lived through that as well, more or less, and I've heard about it countless times. You know, the man is just completely broken after being broken up with, and meanwhile she got right back on the carousel. You know, she got a new man within a week. She's probably already dating a new guy, you know, behind his back. The closest thing, women cry over a Chad. I mean, that's like the closest female equivalent I can come up with, really. But they could just get another Chad, or like a devoted normie. Likewise, in the past, women overlooked their husbands cheating because they were financially dependent on him. So it kind of talks about emotional dependency, how men are emotionally dependent on women, and women are financially dependent on men. It says men overlook cheating because of their emotional dependence, which is totally true. And it's really evil because women take advantage of that, and they almost know that the sub-7 dude is going to forgive them if they cheated because he's so emotionally dependent. And this is why the open relationship proposal is so evil to me. And it's mostly, you know, it's mostly made by women, obviously, to men who women know are very low value, or who have low self-esteem, such low self-esteem that they would go along with it simply because they don't want to lose her. They obviously wouldn't do an open relationship if they had the choice. When men refuse to take appropriate action in response to their wives cheating or other abhorrent behaviors, they are in effect saying, I don't want to know you because I'm not in love with you, I'm in love with my image of you. It doesn't matter what you do, because all I want and need for you is to be my security blanket. I remember she was trying to decide whether... Oh, okay, so this part kind of talks about a mutual friend of the female correspondent who was cheating or whatever. And Michelle Langley, the author, and she says, they talk about a mutual friend who was like contemplating whether she was going to go to see this guy. But meanwhile, all the while she's, you know, supposedly contemplating this, she's literally packing her bags to go see this man. So like, even as women are literally taking the actions to do a particular thing, they will deny their role and pretend like they're still making a decision. If you want to be sure of what you feel for your boyfriend, it is very easy to figure out. In affairs, people typically express their feelings openly. They demonstrate strong physical and emotional feelings for one another, but rarely develop concrete or realistic plans for the future. But now you understand that you have already made many decisions, right? Yes, I do see that, but I still don't think I know what I want. Denial ain't just a river. Jesus fuck. More specifically, they use children as excuses to have affairs instead of taking the appropriate actions to either work on or end their marriages. Additionally, rejected spouses who don't want to divorce often use their children to shame the departing spouse into staying. Unfortunately, it's quite common for them to disparage their partners in front of their children. Likewise, spouses who want to divorce often disparage their rejected spouses in front of their children to justify their leaving. The pain and suffering that children experience during marital discord and divorce usually result from the inappropriate ways in which the parents deal with one another, not the fact of the divorce itself. Children become afraid because they easily recognize that their parents are unable to cope with their own problems. The children have difficulty coping because their parents can't cope. So don't use your children as excuses for what you do, because the way you're handling the situation is making it harder on everyone, including your children. So, even before women are separated or divorced, they're already setting up the "yo, daddy ain't shit" narrative, and as always, alleviating responsibility. Let's say I suggested 2 different restaurants, but neither sounded good to you. Instead of saying, no, I don't want to go to either of those places, you would very likely respond to my suggestions with something like, oh, I don't know, I'm not sure where I want to have lunch, or I don't know what I want. On the other hand, if I made a suggestion that you liked, you would say, yeah, that sounds great, let's go there. This is what I hate about dating apps, actually, strangely. Tinder jesters and idiots will act like you need stand-up comedy bits and elaborate profiles to get girls on dating apps and in general. But every chick I've ever met in person on Tinder agreed to meet me within 10 minutes, max. Any chick that doesn't is just playing games with you or using you for validation or whatever. Women know if they want to meet right away. Make no fucking mistake. If it's not a yes, then it's a no. They ghost men to maintain their innocent images always. It's easier to ghost than to just tell a guy that he's ugly, or that he was just being used for food or attention. Even one of my exes was acting unsure and was like, okay, I'll meet you if you're not a rapist or a murderer, more or less. And I even made a rape joke. I was like, I'm only a rapist on Tuesdays. She already made her choice. She was just messing around. Like, you have to force their hand, but at the same time, you have to let them think that it's their idea. You have to play them at their game. They're children. Your confusion over this has much more to do with what you think you should want rather than what you do want. People want what they don't have, No, I'm saying you're already unconsciously deciding to divorce. I'm telling you to wake up before it happens, because if you don't yearn for a whole lot of pain, the path that you are on will lead to a very predictable place. At some point, possibly very soon, your husband is going to close the door to reconciliation, at which point you will lose your fucking mind. People want what they don't have. If the husband starts going with another woman, or he closes the door on her somehow, she will lose her fucking mind. She will want him more because he removed himself as an option. I can't even count the amount of times I've seen this behavior in women firsthand, personal experience and everything. It's so predictable, it's sad. It's almost like she snaps back to reality and realizes the havoc that she has wrought and how it's all her own doing. But unfortunately, it's too late at that point. The damage is done. Her feelings are probably gone by then. Even the guy's feelings are probably gone because he realizes what this female, like how little regard this female holds him in. There have been many times along the way when you could have either ended your affair with Kurt or ended your marriage. Instead, you've chosen to do neither, which should tell you something. I'm sorry if what I'm about to say hurts, but the truth is you're kidding yourself if you think you're dragging this out because of your big heart and kind nature. In actuality, you're ending your marriage to Brad in the same passive-aggressive manner in which you pursued getting married to him. You had your husband move out of the house because you're involved with someone else and have been for a year, yet you continue to present yourself as the confused woman in order to be viewed in the best possible light. These women have already decided that their husbands can't make them happy, therefore they refuse to let them try. When you initially called me to talk about this, you mentioned a woman at work who was having an affair. You said she told you that it would be easier to handle her husband if he were killed in an accident than it would be to get a divorce. You were horrified by what she said, but you understood how she felt. I've heard a lot of women say the same thing, as horrible as it is. Women who feel this way are in effect saying, I would rather have my husband die than take responsibility for my own life and choices. What I find interesting is that women can feel this way and still feign confusion over the future of their marriages. I've never heard a woman say it would be easier if my lover, the woman she's cheating with, were killed in an accident, or even it would be easier if either my husband or lover were killed in an accident. So how can any woman who feels this way say she's confused about what she wants? Many women say that they wish they felt differently without realizing that they wouldn't need to wish they felt wanted something different unless they didn't want it to begin with. So at this point, you have two options. First option is to keep doing what you're doing until your husband meets someone else, at which time I can always guarantee you'll want him back. In fact, you'll probably start pining for him like you've been pining for your lover. You'll probably also experience a tremendous amount of self-hatred because you realize that you brought this all onto yourself. However, if at any point your husband falls for your pleas to reconcile, you will most likely lose interest in him immediately and start pining for your lover once again. Your indecision has led him to a state of indecision. Limbo is an unconscious state. When people are in limbo, they believe they have no control over their feelings, which is why their feelings can be manipulated. This is why so many women who have zero interest in their husbands miraculously want their husbands back when they move on or meet someone else. Like children, they declare, that's mine, because they don't want anyone else playing with their toy, even though they have no interest in playing with it themselves. Do you think I'll want him back? There is no way to know until you do it. But you will break out of limbo because it's only an imaginary experience. Let me give you an example to understand this better. Let's say I gave your 8-year-old a child. He played with it for a few minutes. I told him that he could keep the new toy. If he gave me one of his favorite toys in return. If I demanded that he make his decision immediately, do you think he could? I'm sure he could. I'm sure he could too. And I'm sure he would recover quite quickly from the loss of either toy. However, what if I gave him another choice? Instead of making a decision now or at the end of 30 days, which do you think he would choose? He would choose the end of the 30 days so he could play with both toys. Obviously, this is like what's going on with these women who cheat on their husbands. They want to play with both toys, both men. This part kind of talks about how people make decisions without previewing the effects of the decision. Staying in limbo allows women the possibility that they can avoid making a decision because if enough time passes, their husbands may decide for them. That's kind of the root of it, like avoiding a decision, making a decision and avoiding accountability. It's almost, I've experienced this myself, it's almost like they want you to make the decision or to give them an ultimatum. You've allowed yourself to believe that you are handling the situation in this manner because you don't want to hurt your husband. However, absolutely nothing you're doing right now is being done to lessen your husband's pain. The truth is just the opposite. You're doing everything you can to keep him in pain. Because as long as he is in pain, you know you have power over him and that he's still an option. This is why women experience so much pain after their husbands move on. Their pain stems from knowing that they can no longer cause pain for their husbands because their husbands have removed themselves as options. And that's what women in limbo are afraid of losing, their options, and including the option to cheat. I've experienced this a lot too. She'll claim to be acting out of compassion as she is literally putting the knife in your back. And every last one of her actions is the perfect action to take if she wanted to cause pain to you, the man. And this is why monk mode is a thing. You have to be enlightened as a man, because there's no excuse these days. You have to be mentally and emotionally immune to this shit, because women will use every means at their disposal to do harm to you. They are inherently evil. Stuff like this makes me think that men are the real masochists in the sadomasochistic dichotomy, and it's not women, as we seem to think in, mainstream society. That's just the superficial side of it, really. It's almost like women allow themselves to take on superficial harm and like physical harm because they realize what it is that they do to men emotionally. So it's like a natural balance that they are reacting to. They want to create a natural balance. One of those female comedians talks about this a little bit too. How she's like, yeah, you see women hint on this a lot. Like, oh, I want to be the boss everywhere but the bedroom, Evolution is a process of transcend and include. This kind of talks about differentiation and integration, which was, I talked about that in the previous video. Therefore, it would seem that only when an individual includes all aspects of human behavior into his or her existence, he or she will be able to transcend a particular behavior. This would explain why the most judgmental and self-righteous among us are often caught with their pants down, engaging in the very behavior they so vehemently rail against. They haven't included certain behaviors in their existence and have therefore been unable to transcend those behaviors. This explains why so many women are getting caught with their pants down today, caught red-handed. Most women have denied that the seeds of infidelity and many other negative behaviors exist within them, so they have been unable to transcend them. This is the holier-than-thou attitude. So many people seem to think that they're incapable of what they consider to be immoral, superficially, until they're put in that perfect position where they commit that evil act. They don't cease to virtue signal, though, when that happens. Oftentimes, they just come up with excuses for themselves and lie as if their situation is unique, even though it's not. Like, I was uniquely tempted into sleeping with an underage girl or whatever. You see that a lot, actually, pedophiles. Langley makes a decent point that we need to not judge people so much, maybe, because we're all capable of bad things, and the more we judge people, the less we can understand and empathize, it seems. But, maybe we can't have it both ways. Either we judge or we don't, and we just let everybody run amok, essentially. Many women feel they can't grow in their marriages. However, often women feel this way because they never reveal their true selves to their husbands. Prior to marriage, many women long to meet a man. They long for their boyfriends to be different. They long to get married. Ironically, women are reluctant to take responsibility for their happiness because they would have to break their addiction to longing. In other words, limbo. You simply can't long for things to be different in your life if you know you have the ability to create the life you want. Being in limbo has become part of your identity. Many women simply replace their previous good girl image with a confused woman image. I explained that the mind is only happy when focused on something, because otherwise it has nothing to do. When the mind has nothing to do, it will seek out or create problems. Having this problem has not only given your mind something to do, it has kept you from worrying about other problems as well. As I've mentioned before, prior to getting married and having children, you had specific goals upon which you focused your attention. Once you achieved everything you wanted, you became restless because your mind had nothing to focus on. As a result of living unconsciously, your mind has created problems for you. The mind unconsciously loves problems because they give you an identity of sorts. This is normal and it is insane. Problem means that you are dwelling on a situation mentally without there being an intention or possibility of taking action now, and that you are unconsciously making it part of your sense of self. It has also become an excuse for not living. Or it also becomes an excuse for not living. Women are not really the committed sex. It appears men are. Women seek commitment, but that doesn't mean they are naturally committed themselves. In fact, women are often only partially committed to men. This part kind of talks about what I was talking about earlier. Men feel a natural obligation to women. The common opinion is that women are more emotionally dependent than men, shows us how nature tricks us. A woman wants a higher level of emotional involvement and is readily upset when she does not receive it, thereby appearing more dependent. Yet she is more independent. It is easier for her to leave a relationship and go on with her life. A typical man is more emotionally dependent. He is less able to leave or to withstand the loss of the woman if the woman leaves. The logic of genetic selection accounts for these perplexing traits. A woman who appears dependent obligates her mate to stay and provide for her, thus giving her children an advantage. She makes a man responsible for her because she cannot make it without him, or so it seems. Yet when it is in her practical interest to leave, her relative independence makes it easier for her to do so than it would be for him. For men, genetic selection works the other way around. The man who appears strong and stable gives a woman confidence that he can support her, thereby increasing his chances of mating with her and producing offspring. Yet the sense of obligation bonds him to his wife and children, leaves him with less real independence than she has. Some combination of obligation, love, and emotional neediness holds men more strongly in their relationships. So maybe the path to liberation is men become less emotionally dependent on women and women become less financially dependent on men. And we're clearly going in this direction already. Men not only fall in love faster than women, they tend to be more idealistic, generous, and appreciative about love than women. To put simply, males tend to think of love as a commitment, whereas females think of love as a feeling. Therefore, females tend to leave their relationship once the feeling is gone. Men often have a hard time understanding how women can be in love with them one day and then suddenly out of love with them and in love with someone else the next. However, with women, this isn't uncommon because feelings come and go. Women don't like to end relationships when they still have feelings, so they wait until their feelings die. Men have no idea that women do this. Men often think their wives and girlfriends actually get over many of the things they've been complaining about, when in fact the women are just waiting until they no longer care. Women think they are clueless for not getting this about them. They think men are clueless for thinking that women will just put up with not getting what they want. In fact, this is often how women get revenge in their relationships. They console themselves with the idea that they'll one day feel nothing. Revenge over some imaginary fucking slight of the man not being perfect and fulfilling your every need without you needing to communicate with him. I'm going to have some more commentary, but I think so much of this, I'm going to have some more commentary soon, but so much of this is just straight up, it's just it speaks for itself. I don't need to comment really. It says it all right there. This is what I meant when I said that women don't tell the whole truth. In actuality, it would be more accurate to say that women avoid taking the necessary steps to resolve their relationship problems. Women avoid taking those steps because they're afraid of losing their relationship prior to losing their feelings. When their feelings are dead and they no longer care if they lose their relationship, they voice all their dissatisfactions. Often it's at that point that they discover their own role in the problem, realizing that if they had voiced their desires and stuck to their guns, they could have resolved their relationship problems. Unfortunately, many women are not risk takers in this respect. The high of being in love is too important to them, so they won't risk doing anything that might cause them to lose a relationship when they're experiencing those feelings. These behaviors make sense when you consider that men view love as a commitment and women view love as a feeling. Women think men are pathetic for putting up with their behavior. However, when you understand the reasons behind the inaction of men, you can see that in many ways it's quite admirable. Often the commitment and obligation men feel towards their wives is not unlike what they feel towards their children. Women are children, basically. The natural obligation men feel also makes them less judgmental than women. In the face of hardships and shortages, the tendency to be upset and to judge and accuse provides a distinct advantage. The woman who condemns a man for his feelings pressures him to work harder and provide more for her. Yes, women are more easily offended than men and judgmental. I'm not even gonna bother reading that cuck shit. That liberal, cop out. Oh, here's the truth, but let's not be mad at them. Okay, what may have once been an adaptive asset has now become the cause of many problems. As long as women are aware of their natural tendency to judge men's performance, they will not only continue to be impossible to please, but they will also be only partially committed in their relationships with men. Commentaries coming up. Most of us will pay a premium today for the opportunity to change our minds tomorrow. But if keeping our options open has benefits, it also has costs. Committed car owners attend to a car's virtues and overlook its flaws. But the buyer for whom escape is still possible is likely to evaluate the new car more critically, paying special attention to imperfections as she tries to decide whether to keep it. Interesting choice of female pronouns there. This is exactly what's going on in many marriages. Everyone in a woman's life pays a premium so she has the opportunity to change her mind tomorrow. Due to her lack of commitment, the woman evaluates her husband more critically and pays special attention to his imperfections as she tries to decide whether or not to keep him. And she really does mean everyone pays a premium for the woman there, like the children, the man, etc. The best, most common example of this probably is how people uproot themselves and make drastic changes in their lives, like a change of residence, for example, to accommodate a relationship. Obviously, it's usually the man making the sacrifice, but the implicit reason he does so is that the woman gets to leave her options open. She probably wouldn't even entertain the possibility of a relationship otherwise. It's much easier for her to escape the relationship because she doesn't have the same emotional dependence. And don't give me that crap about how, the children are attached to women, so therefore it's hard for them. No, the children being attached to the woman is a benefit. That's what ensures for her that society will never discard or neglect her. I mean, look at these child support payments we have today. They're cartoonish. Even without children, just her ability to bear children, it gives her more social value than men. Homeless women get more attention. In New York City, there's this homeless woman with a baby, and she gets so much attention. Sometimes it's negative attention because what the fuck are you doing carrying a baby sleeping on the floor or whatever. But anyways, women's judgmental nature keeps them from happiness because it keeps them from making a full commitment. Plus, their constant judgment and assessment of men's behavior drains them emotionally, fooling them into thinking they do a whole lot more than they actually do. To put this in perspective, think about how draining it can be to care for children. It's draining because you have to constantly monitor their behavior. You have to watch what they're doing so they don't hurt themselves. The relief women experience when they separate from their husbands results from dropping their perceived role of wife, which typically includes their constant, albeit unnecessary, judging and monitoring of their husband's behavior. Being in a relationship for a woman clearly means being a dictator, Unfortunately, instead of being fully in their relationships, the natural tendency of women to judge men's behavior causes women to be always standing just a little bit outside of their relationships. Like I said, 1 foot out the door. Although women believe themselves to be naturally committed, in fact, they are naturally inclined to judge and assess the behavior of men to determine the man's level of commitment to them. As a result, many women are unable to resolve their real problems in the relationship, stem from their own lack of commitment. I think she meant to say realize instead of resolve there. The mindset of an individual who gives partial commitment is I hope or I'll try. The mindset of an individual who gives a full commitment is I will. It's exactly the kind of language that one of my exes used, and I specifically called her out on it, and I said, people with actual intent say I will. I even quoted the Star Wars shit, and she cringed. There is no try, there's only do and do not. I think Yoda said that quote, and I still have those fucking emails too. So, whatever. Had you been fully committed to your marriage, you would have made Brad aware of your needs from the very beginning because you knew your needs were not being met. If your needs were not being met, the relationship would deteriorate. This is the primary problem women have with their relationships. Every woman knows from the outset that she will not go indefinitely without getting what she wants and needs from the relationship. However, most women are only committed to getting commitment from a man. Then they hope and wait to see if the man can fulfill her needs. In other words, instead of creating their happiness, most women wait to see if someone else, a chosen man, will create it for them. Yet it is impossible for someone else to make us happy, and this is why many women find themselves unhappy regardless of the partner they are with or the circumstances they're in. Interestingly, growing apart is the most common reason women give for wanting to end their marriages. I've found that many women think they've grown while their husbands haven't, yet they go on to repeat the same pattern in the succeeding relationships. They choose the men they want to be with, create the relationships they think they want to have, and then try to wiggle their way out of those relationships by slowly deconstructing what they painstakingly created. In fact, women are simply trying to end their marriages in the same way that they try to end their relationships prior to getting married. They are trying to blow out their husbands, thinking that if they're cold and distant long enough, their husbands will eventually take the hint and disappear. However, this method of ending a relationship doesn't work in marriage. Contrary to what some women believe, men are not willing to just walk away from their families. The cat is moaning. Man, what the fuck you want, motherfucker? Anyways, in the past, couples didn't have a choice about whether to stay together. They were forced by circumstance and the need for survival. We glamorized marriages from the past by pretending that people voluntarily stayed together, instead of acknowledging that the majority of people didn't have alternatives. In fact, many marriages of the past were not only highly dysfunctional, but abusive. So feeling nostalgic for the perfect marriages of the past is like feeling nostalgic for a time where money grew on trees. I always told traditionalists not to look at the past with rose-tinted goggles, But nonetheless, the nuclear family system was probably better than what we have now. Single moms, absentee chatties, Chad fathers, Chad daddies, abused, neglected children, children of divorce, etc., 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 etc. Today's survival is not contingent upon staying together, so marriages and relationships no longer have a built-in purpose. In order to last, today's marriages and relationships must serve a new purpose. Most people meet someone, become infatuated, fall in love, date, marry, without ever taking the time to explore the purpose of their relationship. I've never felt confident about having that conversation with the female that I've been with, because, they're not living deliberately to begin with, so it's pointless. If you leave your husband and make a commitment to a different man based only on your feelings, then you will once again be choosing your old life, which you already know you don't want. The only difference is that this time it will be with a different man. A lot of women, they leave their guy, get with a new man, same shit, same shit happens. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I hope you got something out of this shit. More to come soon-ish, maybe. We'll see. But yeah, that's it. I thought it was a good book. I certainly don't regret reading it. It's a really good book. Highly recommend it. Along with Esther Villar, The Manipulated Man. Warren Farrell's book is good. The Myth of Male Power. And some other books which don't necessarily have anything to do with gender. Like I reviewed a lot of Ted Kaczynski stuff on my channel, and the evolutionary psychology of politics on my channel. Anyways, this is the most in-depth review I've done so far, so I hope y'all motherfuckers got something out of this, and peace out.